To celebrate Black history and accomplishment, the Post and Courier once again presents this series of video interviews featuring 12 dynamic leaders to know in South Carolina. We talk with people from all over the state about their efforts to advance social justice, celebrate Black culture and enterprise, address community needs, and create a better world. Our videos will be released monthly on the Post and Courier website through January 2024. To watch and to read our 12 profiles, plus essays on Martin Luther King Jr., go to postandcourier.com/Black History. Join us again this year in learning about some of our state's remarkable change agents. All right, well, I can see the forest for the trees.
Ha ha.
Kerri, Forrest.
Hello, Adam.
Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining us and talking with us today about you and your work and your life. So what is it that you love so much about Charleston? You were born here, you grew up in the area, and you're working here and living here now. And you recently got a new job and refused to leave, even though the job is, base is, So why do you like Charleston so much?
You know, it's interesting because when I graduated from Bishop England and left for college, I was literally like, I'm out of here. You won't catch me back here. I'm off to wherever far afield I can get to. But there's, I think, some comfort in being home, in being surrounded by your family and your friends and just the familiar that I enjoy. You can't beat the weather.
But maybe you enjoy it so much because you did go off and have many years away.
Yeah, I mean, it gives an appreciation. And even now, I travel enough that I miss being home when I'm not home. I just got off 2 weeks on the road for some training, and like the nicest thing was Saturday, just like in my house, looking off of the balcony at my apartment at, staring off into the oak trees and hanging out with my dogs. Like, there's still this is home base. It doesn't matter where I go, this is home base. And I think it really is, a lot of it is connection to family and heritage. The most fun that I had when I first moved back was Christmas Eve, and a bunch of my cousins came over to hang out for Christmas Eve. And I mean, we stayed up until like some ridiculous hour, hanging out like we were kids, and we were all like in our 30s. But what was really special, and again, having lived away and then come back, the appreciation for having people in proximity. I mean, when I lived in DC, my sister and my nieces are there, but not that extended family.
Right.
And then working in television, particularly in cable news, like, holiday? What's a holiday?
Yeah.
So you lose a connection to ritual and tradition. Exactly.
Everything that's real.
Everything that's real. But you lose a lot of connection to ritual and tradition when you're working that kind of schedule. So it gave me much more of an appreciation for it when I came back.
Okay, well, that makes sense. You grew up in the Westchester neighborhood on James Island, deep into James Island.
Almost to Folly Beach.
Almost to Folly Beach.
Yeah.
And this was a largely African-American, middle-class
Middle-class African-American neighborhood. My father was a builder, so he built our house in Westchester. And again, family. My mother's sister, we have one who's catty corner across the street, another one who's around the corner. One of my dad's sisters is, around the corner in the other direction. My dad was a Shriner, so a lot of his Shriner buddies lived in the neighborhood. And, again, that sense of community within an African-American middle-class community was, I think, very important, informative for us.
I guess it kept you grounded. It gave you a base and a set of values that.
Yeah, I mean, I tease that I grew up Catholic Baptist because I went to Nativity in Bishop England, so I was, Catholic school 5 days a week, but attended New Tabernacle Fourth Baptist on Charlotte and Elizabeth on Sundays, and my dad was a trustee, my mother was heavily involved, and so we were, every Sunday in the same pew every Sunday with my aunts in the same pew every Sunday, and my aunts and my grandmother singing in the choir, and so, yeah, that sense of, values and the importance of family and the importance of community and staying connected.
Was it that sort of superstructure that you had here Was that almost the reason why you escaped off into TV land?
Yeah.
And then it's the reason you came back?
Yeah. Sometimes you just don't know till you go.
So the TV thing is interesting because you weren't on a track for TV, right? Your education was leading you elsewhere, and you just tossed it aside and said, to hell with this, I'm going to DC.
Yeah.
To be with my sister and gain entree into the...
I don't even know if it was that clear. I was just going to DC. Let's see what happens.
Because you were going to be a doctor.
I was pre-med biology at Clemson, so I was doing all the things. I was doing all the pre-med courses, and I took biology and chem and physics, and hated physics, but I suffered through it all. I did the thing. I did a summer program in New Orleans where I was actually studying for the MCATs, but I was a radio DJ at Clemson, and that was my outlet. And just like, if you don't know, I'm a talker. So that's like my natural default is to talk.
And so to talk on the radio wasn't so bad.
It wasn't so bad. I had fun, and we used to have a great time, just really good energy. And my sister was, or still is, the executive secretary for one of those large churches in DC, and so she's how I got the connection to go to the program in New Orleans where I was studying for med school. She's also the connection that got me to NBC through Ed Suber, who was an engineer for WRC, the local affiliate. So it was nice to be able to sort of pick a path and go, let's see where this goes.
And boy, did it go.
It went. It went.
It went big.
Yeah.
I mean, you were how many years at NBC?
Geez.
Like 17 or something?
So it's a little less than that because I did a couple years at CBS before I was just like, I'm out of here, I'm done. But I mean, I started there right out of college in '95 as a page.
As a page, like fetching coffee,
like
the cliche,
toll
right?
coffees, making copies, answering doors and phones.
Bumping into the anchors in the hallways and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like all the cool stuff.
Did you spill coffee on anybody?
Not that I remember, but it's possible.
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur. But I mean, the WRC building on Nebraska Avenue, which I'm not even sure if it's still there, but that building has a long history. I mean, Willard Scott was reporting out of that building, doing the weather from that building. Captain Kangaroo started in that building, if I remember correctly, and the Muppets. So we used to tell this story when we gave the tour of the building, because the pages also had to give the tour, and we would tell stories to the kids groups that came in about how, if you looked really closely, there were still Muppets hiding in the rafters because they didn't want to go to New York.
I didn't know the Muppets started in DC.
Yeah. So
I had no idea.
So it was just a great little story to tell when we were doing the tours. So, and hopefully I got that story right, because it's been about 25 years since I told it, but you get the general gist of it.
So you started as a page and you ended up as like a senior producer working with major figures.
Yeah, so I mean, quick trajectory. I was, a page and then went to the Today Show in the Washington office as a production assistant. And then MSNBC launched, and they basically pulled every kid they could find from all of the corners of NBC, and then just enough adults to make sure that the place didn't burn down, and got us up and running on the air. And so I went from a page to a production assistant to a booker. And in TV terms, a booker is the person who's dialing on the phone all day looking for people to talk, either in a studio, on set, or by phone whenever there's breaking news. And I mean, like, you want to talk about a churn? That's a churn.
That's a churn.
Because that's basically like you're dialing for dollars all day. You come in at 9 and you're booking for the 12, and then at 12 o'clock you're booking for the 3 o'clock show, and then at 3 o'clock you're booking for the 7, and then at 7 you're trying to, if you get to leave, you're trying to find somebody to start the day the next day.
For how long did you do that? Because I'd burn out quickly, I think.
Yeah, I have a knack for the complex, so I think I probably just deal with stuff longer than average. But I did that until the Monica Lewinsky story broke, and then I managed to talk my way into moving from New Jersey back to DC to help cover the impeachment trial on the Hill. Yeah. And so then I wasn't dialing for dollars everywhere. I was just dialing for dollars around DC, trying to find members of Congress who would,
would
come on the
talk,
shows.
right.
So I did that. That got me back into DC, and then I worked on a series of shows. I worked on a version of Equal Time, this one with Ollie North and Paul Begala. I worked on, very briefly, Watch It with Laura Ingraham. I worked on a bunch of different shows, and then landed at Hardball for a while. And I was on Hardball
With Chris Matthews.
With Chris Matthews from, I want to say, like 2002 to 2005, and did the Hardball College tours. So that was, we were on the road every week for 30 weeks straight during election season, doing these big road shows.
Wow.
And that was
and
crazy.
every new place you had put the whole show together.
Put the whole thing together, find 500 people to come sit in an audience, talk to some, politician, break it all down, get home on Friday, do laundry, and get back on a plane like Sunday or Monday and do it all over again for 30 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was crazy, but it was fun.
Yeah.
We had a good time with that. And then I went into the White House unit in 2005. I want to say it was 2005, and I worked as a White House producer from 2005. So where are we timing-wise? 95, 2005 is 10.
Right.
So I did that.
So you're still at NBC.
Still at NBC, still in the NBC family. Worked as a White House producer during George Bush's last term. When President Obama was elected in 2008, I moved over to CBS and worked as their senior producer for Washington for the early show.
Got it.
And at that
That
point,
wasn't
it
quite
was
the
like,
same.
it was not the same in so many ways, in so many ways. But it was also just, I think in a lot of it was just I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to everything I just told you I did in 12 years,
Yeah.
it was just like, yeah, I don't need to keep gunning like this anymore.
Right.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm going home.
So Charleston beckoned. Charleston beckoned. You came back home and you did all kinds of things. You joined boards of directors and you got involved in consulting and but at a certain point you really, and I don't think it took very long, right? You kind of landed on your feet.
It was an interesting transition for a couple of reasons. And I tell people that I meet who move to Charleston that you really have to give it 3 years to find the swim. Because most cities, either they like you or they don't, and if they really don't like you, they'll kick you out in 3 years. The pressures will be too much. Mm-hmm. But if you can wing it if you can hang in for 3 years, you usually will figure out where you fit in that structure. So
That's good advice.
yeah, I mean, so I came home and, I did some consulting. I, actually went back to DC for the 2012 election cycle and did some production work for a partnership between NBC and TV1 with Craig Melvin as our anchor. And we did both the Democratic and the Republican conventions and election night for TV1, done out of the NBC studios. So that was helpful because that was, solid cash flow while I was trying to figure it out. I taught a class at the Art Institute. I taught a class at the College of Charleston. I did a lot of consulting gigging and I was on a lot of boards. So, I mean, I found ways to sustain myself, but I think what I appreciated about it was still something different every day. I'm definitely I need variety and complexity.
Yeah.
And even though it was crazy, I still had control over it. I chose to want to teach. I chose to, want to do the consulting things that I did. So that was nice. And the other thing that I did during that time that I think was important was during that 3 years where I was trying to figure out whether it was going to work or wasn't going to work was that day when I woke up and said, either you're here or you're in DC, you can't be both, so pick one. And so that was the year that I was sort of like, I'm in Charleston, I'm gonna make this work, I'm gonna really get into, socially and, community service and everything else, but it had to be, DC DC's great, but I didn't go to DC for a couple of years after that 2012 gig.
Is that when you joined the board of the YWCA?
I joined the board of the Y, I feel like almost as soon as I got back here in 2010. Yolanda O'Neill was the person who invited me to.
And they were in big transition. I mean, the building, they were selling the building.
Yeah.
They were looking for a new director at some point.
Yeah, that was all. So when I joined in 2011, the Y was on Cumming Street.
Yeah.
And
right near Calhoun.
Right near Calhoun, right in the middle of the College of Charleston, really, at that point. And so, and it was really an organization that has a deep history in the community, but we were trying to figure out our why. Like, what are we now?
The why's why. Exactly.
And so with a lot of transition happening at the Y between, say, 2013, 14, when Kathleen Matthews retired, and not Matthews, Kathleen Rogers retired, and then we were also in the process of trying to decide whether we were going to sell Cumming Street. And in all of that transition, and Ida Sproul had stepped down from board chair at that point, and it was like, you'd be great as board chair. And I'm like, oh, but wait, I just took a new job.
Teaching and consulting.
Kind of busy. Well, no, so the teaching and consulting, let me back up, led to me working at the American College of the Building Arts. And so I was at ACBA and doing my board service and trying to get ACBA's capital campaign started to move into the trolley barn when I got
Upper Meeting Street.
On Upper Meeting Street, and then got connected to the recruiter for Donnelly and got the Donnelly job at the same time that all this stuff was happening as a board member at the YWCA.
Which was itself keeping you very, very busy because of all the transitional stuff.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so you land at the Donnelly Foundation, the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation.
Yes.
Which is based in Chicago, but has a huge focus in the low country of South Carolina, conservation and the arts.
And museum and library collections, which is now broadening narratives, which is more around cultural preservation.
And cultural preservation, okay. Which you helped get started, that
program.
Last thing, right?
That last thing was, so one of the things that the Donnelly Foundation does is that we do strategy review. Usually it's on a 3-year.
You're not part of the Donnelly Foundation anymore.
I know, it's hard.
You have to talk about it in the past tense.
In the past tense, it's hard. Donnelly Foundation does strategy review every 3 years. And so every 3 years, we're sort of looking at, is the strategy right-sized for the community that they're in, and the time that it's operating in.
Yeah.
At the time, when I was still at Donnelly, we realized that the collections strategy, museum and library collections, really felt like it was just sort of disparate parts of interesting stuff, but it didn't have the connective tissue to really say that the foundation was moving something forward. So at the time, we went through a large effort to have the grantees and other people who are practitioners in that space talk about what are the things that really are important in that field that need to be lifted up and need to be financially supported. And at the time, it was really, how do you get the important stories of community, the important stories for underserved communities, particularly told in a way that still values the community and it's not extracted and told by a majority audience. And so we spent 3 years working with consultants, working with the grantee partners to really define broadening narratives as a way to tell those stories from the perspective of the communities that own the stories, as opposed to the institutions on the outside.
Looking in.
Right.
Wow. So you were 7 years at the Donnelly Foundation?
Yes.
And there was this, which clearly it sounds to me like you were very personally invested in that project.
Yes.
That this was very meaningful to you personally. But you were also invested, I mean, you knew something of the arts, which was a big focus of yours as well, helping to get grants and develop programs and guide people to all kinds of things, which meant you could bring to bear your mentoring consultant talents as well, right? The conservation stuff, though, was brand new to you, right? Like, you...
What is that?
You found yourself out in the wild.
Literally.
And didn't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, conservation was...
That must have been fun, though.
Conservation was a lift. It was definitely
Yeah.
a lift. But it
you
was
met some interesting people.
I did. It was a fun lift, though. And I think...
Got to ride in a lot of pickup trucks, I bet.
Oh, dude. And, like, I have duck hunting gear now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
like, I never thought... I got duck.
You've been duck hunting.
I have been duck hunting.
Yes.
I have been out in skiffs and, like, you know, waterways. Like, seriously, like, there's a whole other world that I didn't even know existed until I started doing that work. And it's interesting because land conservation is such a technical term in some ways. Like, if you ask people if they care about the Francis Marion Forest, yeah. If you ask people if they care about making sure that there's enough open space balanced with, you know, building and growth.
Right.
Yeah.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
who's against it?
Yeah,
Right.
but if you say land conservation, like, getting people to understand what that was a challenge, or people who aren't in the space, and then also getting people...
And how to do it.
And how to do
Like,
it.
what does that mean?
But it's also the people who do it, getting them to stop talking in acronyms so that you actually can talk to regular people about why this is important. So I actually think the journalism background came in handy in a lot of ways, but particularly with that, because I knew, like, enough to be dangerous getting in, but I was curious enough from my journalism background to just ask all the questions. And I would tell the grantees, and I would go out on these ride-arounds, like, I'm gonna ask you a million stupid questions, just bear with me. I mean,
They must have loved it, though.
you know, it was, everybody was great. Everybody was amazing. I will tell you, Raleigh West, who is now the head of the Conservation Bank, when he was the head of Lord Berkeley Conservation Trust, and man, Raleigh's my dude. We have gone through a lot together in that time frame. But the first meeting that I had with him was like a ride around in Berkeley County. And so it's like meeting up with him in his office in Monk's Corner, getting in this big Ford F-150 and driving around, looking at trees and stuff.
You have to wear boots.
And
You
like,
walk
I
through
didn't even
mud.
like wear all the right stuff. And he wanted to go take me to go like look at this, you know, tract that they were getting ready to preserve. And we were talking about, you know, like the burial ground, like Swamp Fox, Francis Marion. And I'm like, I mean, I care. I don't know what you're talking about. So, and he was great because he just explained it all, like soup to nuts, of like what he does, why he does it, why it's important, how he came into it. I mean, he grew up, you know, out on the land, so it was really like being able to see why it was important to him and how he was pouring that into his work.
Was it infectious? Did you find yourself over time caring?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what's been really interesting about doing the work with Donnelly, or doing any work over time, is you start to see where things are interconnecting. And I used to tease people all the time that, like, you know, in Charleston, I can have a conversation and hit at least 2 of the 3 program areas and a few other things with just about everybody that you talk to, because conservation, the land is tied into the arts is tied into the cultural preservation. It's one big circle. It's so intertwined here that you can't have one conversation without the other.
Yeah,
and
especially in this area.
Exactly.
It seems to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's just very invested in all of it, really.
Yeah.
Whether
Even if
they
you don't know
it or
it.
not.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so then, and very recently, you took this job at MDC. What does MDC stand for?
So MDC.
I don't even think they know.
No, well, that. John and I were doing, John Simpkins, the president and CEO, and I were doing a training last week or 2 weeks ago up in Conway. And he said, MDC, you know, it used to stand for Manpower Development Corporation. And it was formed out of a fund to make sure that people in rural communities in North Carolina were getting workforce training to move into the more urban areas. But now MDC is like, and it's like IBM and KFC. And he said that, and I was like, yeah, I guess we are. But, you know, what I really appreciate is how he has framed it as it's MDC being meaning, dignity, and community. That we are helping to form a South where all people thrive, where individuals find meaning, that they have dignity in the work and in the lives that they're living, and that we're building community.
That is a good description, I think, of what I think of it as a kind of community development organization that works throughout the rural South, especially, but not only, in a variety of different ways, right?
Yeah.
They do that every 5 years or so. There's the State of the South report that they do, that you publish.
Yeah. So, the State of the South is, in evolution a little bit. So John became president of MDC right in the middle of COVID. And as you can imagine, most of the outward-facing things were restructured because of COVID.
Sure.
And State of the South had not been done since COVID.
It was supposed to be done at that point.
Well, I mean, it hadn't, there was not, other things were being worked on, so State of the South had been, what's the word I want to say, but it was on pause.
Yeah.
So State of the South is back, but it's back in a different format. So it's a much more dynamic initiative than just putting a 30-page report together. So now State of the South is a series of conversations and a series of convenings across the South to look at the data, the regional data. So some of that data includes how the population has shifted in the South, how much of that population is coming in from outside of the South versus Southerners moving to other Southern states.
Which happens a lot.
Which happens a lot, but you'd be really interested to look at the way it shakes out over a 10-year period. Looking at the racial demographics and how those have shifted over the last decade, particularly when you look at white populations, black populations, Hispanic populations, and the rapid growth of Hispanic populations across the South. So taking data like that and then putting it in conversation with community members to really talk about, so what does the data tell you? And where are the points where we can agree to collaborate to make improvements in the areas where we may see a delta? So State of the South is currently a lot of those conversations, which will come and culminate in a report sometime this fall. And then once we have the report, continuing conversations based on what we're hearing.
Well, so it's really all about engagement.
Okay.
I mean, you're really reaching out and talking to people and figuring out what it is they need and what they do and how it works or doesn't work, as the case may be.
Yeah. I mean, and I use this analogy in a conversation I was having with someone when I first started at MDC, and it goes back to Berkeley County. Jim Rozier, who was the Berkeley County executive?
For a long time.
Who was hilarious. So Raleigh, because that was his board chair, took me to Jim's house to get on a pontoon to go ride down the Cooper River to go look at property that they were.
Sounds like Jim Rozier.
And you go in Jim's house, and he is a good Clemson Tiger. He has got every game ever broadcast on a wall. I'm a good Clemson Tiger, so I appreciate that, right? So we're on this pontoon, and we're talking about life, and he looks at me and he says, it is our job to take people from being at a point where they're comfortable, but they're not doing well, but they don't want to mess with it because they're too afraid to see what's on the other side of it, so they're comfortable. They're not happy, they're not doing well, but they're comfortable. It's your job to take them through the uncomfortable, through all the messy stuff, and help them get out the other side to comfortable but in a better life. And that really has stuck with me from that ride. Because it's true. I mean, MDC, what we're doing a lot of times is we're holding space, and we're giving people permission to be messy and to work through their issues. Not attacking people, but let's attack the issue. We'll give you the tools to do it. We'll help you think about it and contextualize it. And then we'll help you come up with solutions that you can collectively work on in order to make those communities better.
Wow. Fantastic. And you're just beginning this work.
Yeah. It's fun, though.
Yeah, and John Simpkins, I mean, is relatively new as well to the organization. So it's a whole new era now.
Yeah, he calls it a 37-year-old startup.
There we go. I like that. That's good. Well, you have your work cut out for you, Kerri Forrest.
Adam Parker.
Good luck. Good luck with everything. That sounds fantastic, because there are a few issues facing the South, like, one or two.
Yeah, maybe. I think we can handle it.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. Listen, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.